Welcome to the second and last part of the presentation on using repurposed and recycled materials in sculpture. The artists that are going to be discussed on this second part of presentation are Gordon Fraud, Nicholas Slobo, Dabuko Ntuli, and lastly Johnson Zuze. Next page we look at the work of the artist Gordon Fraud. Gordon Fraud, born in 1963 in Johannesburg, is a South African artist and curator. Fraud used found and untraditional materials in his sculptures. He attempts to explore the human condition in his work, particularly with regards to DNA, babies, genetics, bacteria, viruses, and self-portraits. He currently balances his art practice and curation with running his own Goddard Gallery, which focuses on developing previously little known artists. Gordon Fraud's sculptures are discussed in the next slides. The Holy Book of Alice is a sculpture of a book that has some holes in it. Gordon says the following about the sculpture, I quote, "I made use of various size hole saws and used this to literally edit the book by removing circular sections of image and text. The result is a book object that can no longer be read as a comprehensible narrative since the narrative is interrupted. The book object becomes an interesting sculptural object whose three-dimensionality is enhanced by steel cables that pierce the pages and hold the book upright in the round, and allow individual pages to be seen or paged. This pierced book becomes the Holy Book of Alice, playing on the tradition of holy books and the visual pun of a book of holes." Close quote. White cone virus sculpture follows on the next slide. White cone virus is a sculpture made of plastic road cones. The cones are joined together to form a virus or star-like shape. The sculpture is freestanding and white in color. Polyhedron sculpture is discussed next. Polyhedron is a sculpture made of powder-coated metal mesh. The powder-coated mesh is cut and designed in multiple star shapes. Even though the metal is a two-dimensional material, but how it is constructed gives it volume to look three-dimensional. The sculpture is also arranged in a beautiful pattern, making it compelling to look at over and over again. On the next slide, we look at the sculpture called Rhino. Rhino is a sculpture of an animal called a rhino. The sculpture is made of steel and plastic-coated hangers. To give the sculpture balance and width, Fraud built a steel armature, painted it, then built around with plastic-coated hangers. The armature also gives the sculpture a three-dimensional look. Like most of Gordon's work, Rhino sculpture is designed in a symmetric pattern. Next is Nicholas Slobo. South African artist Nicholas Slobo creates works on paper, sculptures, and performances that activate the associative potential of materials such as ribbon, leather, and rubber. Laden with innuendo and wordplay, Slobo's works fluidly traverse topics related to identity, including gender, sexuality, and ethnicity, encoding an artist's position as a descendant of Xhosa, one of South Africa's largest indigenous communities. Slobo's materially charged works involve cutting and piecing materials together with the repetitious baseball stitch visible across their surface. Leather, another recurring material in Slobo's practice, references the economic, social, political, and spiritual significance of cattle to Xhosa culture. The commemorative practice in Xhosa culture whereby a cow's hide is used to cover a corpse before burial, protecting the individual in his or her passage to the afterlife. The materials used in Slobo's practice are often playfully juxtaposed to enhance their masculine or feminine properties, drawing attention to gender binaries, Rubber, for instance, references automobiles and their emblem in South Africa as a masculine status symbol, along with condoms and gender subculture in the context of sadomasochism. Ribbons and embroidery flicker through his stitched works, bringing a contrast of warmth and softness generally associated with female handiwork. Let us look at Hlobo's sculptures. Ingubo yesizwe, a blanket of the nation when translated, is comprised of hundreds of tiny stitched pieces of discarded leather and rubber, sewn together to become the multifaceted skin of a large animal-like form. The work references the tradition in Xhosa culture of commemorating important milestone with the ceremonial slaughter of a cow. In the death ritual in particular, the animal's hide is used to cover the corpse before burial to protect the deceased in his or her voyage to the afterlife. Umthubi sculpture is discussed next. Umthubi. The sculpture is constructed into a kraal. A kraal is an enclosure for cattle or other livestock. The kraal is made of woods, which are connected together using wires. Normally, a kraal is a very serious place where only a selected few are allowed to enter. Traditionally, the selected few are men. To give it a less serious look, Hlobo added the trampoline inside the kraal to give it a playful feeling. Also, the color pink of the trampoline adds a feminine feeling to this masculine sculpture. Hlobo states that he created this sculpture to challenge the notion of a kraal, which is traditionally associated with masculinity. Dabuko Ntuli is a multidisciplinary artist and spiritual polymath. His proud Zulu heritage informs his art. In his diverse portfolio of works, one can see a certain theme of traditionalism mixed with the everyday. Hunting eyeless portraits of elders are created from discarded cans, plastic bottles, and adorned with bold Zulu coloring and geometric patterns. His work is a mosaic of modern South African life, beauty in the darkness, utility in the rejected, and simplicity in the convoluted. Let us look at the two works of Dabuko Ntuli in the next two slides. Itwasa is a portrait sculpture of an African traditional healer by Dabuko Ntuli. The sculpture is made of pine wood. The small wood in a face are glued together with the wood glue to create a puzzle look. The woods on the head are made to look like the brownish dreadlocked hair that normally traditional healers come back with from the initiations. Next is the Isicholo sculpture. Isicholo is a portrait sculpture of a woman wearing isicholo, a Zulu hat worn by a married woman. The portrait is collaged using wood, leather, and other found objects. Ntuli used screws and washel to join the wood and leather together. The washel also serves as a decorative object on the head. The entire sculpture is painted with acrylic paints, with the nose and neck painted on customary South African colors. Next, we discuss the work of the Zimbabwean artist Johnson Zuze. Johnson Zuze was born in 1985 and was largely inspired creatively by the 1990s. He is a Zimbabwean artist located in the capital Harare and has mastered creating valuable art using scrap metals and waste while combating pollution. The work of Johnson Zuze is an inspired ode to the energy of objects. He employs disused materials such as glass, wire, plastic, metals, and rubber to create arresting visual presences, thus elevating his media to a higher existence. Johnson moves around to pick range of waste that includes electronic gadgets, tins, plastic bottles, papers, wood, and metal, which makes up major component in forming sculptures, whose subject range from animals to abstract forms. His work, also known as found object sculpturing, was on display following the opening of his Animal Kingdom exhibition at Gallery Delta, with support from the Embassy of Switzerland. Zuze says, I quote, I am a found object visual artist and I work with garbage material that I collect from a dump site in Chitagwiza and turn into different pieces of art that you are seeing today. The primary objective of my work is to show different social messages using waste material that has become a nuisance in my community as it is not being regularly collected. The idea, he explained, is to give new existence to daily objects, providing them with a lively, unexpected presence beyond their primary use and into a poetic dimension. By collecting junk in the street, Zuze attests to promoting a clean environment and recycling culture that can help address the country's waste burden. He says his aim is to find creative ways and means to preserve the environment by using waste and materials to create art. So he tries to bring back to life objects and material that have been thrown away, and he equates that to representing the downtrodden people in the society. This concludes our presentation on using repurposed and recycled materials in sculpture. To summarize, as Martin Varro alluded, that sculpting is a form of art which creates three-dimensional artwork achieved by shaping certain materials, meaning that any material such as paper, metal spoon, shoes, clothes, plastic bottles, among others, can all be manipulated into making a sculpture. In addition, sculptures can be made to document history, protest, communicate, and even decorate, among other things. Thank you for being part of this presentation. I hope what has been discussed will help spark new and creative ideas as you work on your own sculptures. Remember, there are no limitations to making art. Tell your story with what is around and available to you. On that note, I would like to finish with this quote by Francis Bacon. I use all sorts of things to work with, old brooms, old sweaters, and all kinds of peculiar tools and materials. I paint to excite myself and make something for myself. Thank you.